Amy. Good afternoon. Thanks everybody for joining us today. Thanks to those who are returning and also anyone joining us for the first time, welcome. We're happy to be able to offer another session of our Workforce Collaborative Training Series to our dedicated providers in our community. Today, we're very excited to have our own Christine Slocum, Housing Coordinator with our department, the Erie County Department of Mental Health, with us to talk about Everyone Helps Carry the Water, ways to minimize burnout in the workplace. First, a few quick reminders. At the end of this session, we will be asking you to complete a very brief evaluation. Please take a moment to fill this out so we can continue to improve. Please note our December training will be on December 10th at 12 o'clock, which is a change from our normal fourth Tuesday of the month. The topic will be Brain Health 101, a new frontier in the fight against Alzheimer's, presented by the Alzheimer's Association. I actually had the opportunity to participate in this training and it was great. Alzheimer's and dementia are not just older adult concerns anymore. Come hear about lifestyle habits and ways to improve your brain health that can help lower your risk. Be on the lookout for registration information, which will be coming out very soon. Announcements for future sessions will be sent out via email, or you can go to the erie.gov/mental health website for these announcements and also registration information. Presentations and recordings for our past offerings are posted on our website, and we'd encourage you to check those out as well. The recording and slides from today's presentation will be posted to our website within the next few days. We are looking at filling our calendar for 2025, and we'd love to have our community of providers share their expertise with us. If you're interested in doing a 1-hour presentation, or if you're interested in a particular topic, please indicate that on the evaluation, or you can email Amy at amy.rockwood@erie.gov. The training is being recorded today and everyone is muted. I will be monitoring the chat during the presentation, so please feel free to put any questions you may have into the chat box and Christine will answer them as we go. Again, thank you all for joining us today, and I'd like to introduce Christine Slocum. Thanks for joining us, Christine.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. All right, so as my colleague said, I'm Christine Slocum. I'm the housing coordinator for the Adult Single Point of Access, and I'll just jump right in. So if all goes to plan, you should be seeing my screen right now. All right, so I called this We All Carry the Water because I was going to take a firefighting metaphor to burnout, and then I proceeded not to touch that metaphor again for the rest of the presentation. So we'll just go with it. My contact information is right there, just like everyone else in Erie County, first name dot last name at erie.gov. Unless you have multiple people with your name, then you get some numbers attached. Please do put questions in the chat. Kathleen will read them. I can't see the slides. Is that?
We can see them on our end.
Okay. So.
Is it on a different screen of yours, I wonder?
Okay, it looks like some folks can see them.
Yeah, I was just, yeah.
All right. So I'm going to start off with a story. As the housing coordinator for the Adult Single Point of Access, my team, there's about 3 of us, are more known for the part of our job where we connect people to the mental health residential system through referrals. And we are not as well known for the part of our work where we do oversight for the supportive housing grants that the Department of Mental Health has. So probably a few months ago, one of the assistant housing coordinators and I were doing an apartment visit, which is part of the site monitoring. And when we go to the apartments, supportive housing grants are kind of like Section 8 with housing caseworkers. So we're just going to the apartment itself to make sure it's got walls, ceilings, all the doors, windows, everything's in good shape, that the apartment's habitable. And then, we'll usually chat with the program participants just as a way to check in to see how things are going. So she and I go to this apartment. It's the 2nd floor of a double, and knock on the door opens, and the program participant lets us in. And the first thing you see is that there are 3 grandchildren sitting on a bench eating snacks, and they look really happy, not just because children are a core constituent of the Snack Appreciation Society, but they were children at grandma's house. When you look around a bit more, you see that there's art on the walls. The colors are bright and warm, and they reflect the cultural heritage of the person that we're visiting. There's a couple cats in the corner, and there's a kitten and a candy dish curled up taking a nap. The apartment looked great. The woman we were talking to was in great spirits, and it was very overwhelmingly a happy home. Now, this particular program was one of our HUD programs, which means that when we first met her, when the provider started working with her, she was homeless. And because she had been a client of that assistant housing coordinator at a previous job, we were familiar that she had some history where she benefited from substance use treatment and she benefited from mental health treatment. And what I was getting to see years later is that with the assistance that was provided, she had completely turned her life around, where now she's spending her golden years with her grandchildren, and her grandkids get to spend her golden years with her. They're going to keep that memory with them forever, as long as they're with us. And it was really lovely. And I share this because the work that we do really does matter. We do make a very deep, positive change in our community in the incremental little bit by bit work we do every day. But the thing is, the positive change that we make, it doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen by ourselves. And if we are going to be successful in the community, we need to make sure that we ourselves as workers, but also as those of us who are facilitating the workforce, are doing it in a way where we will last and persist, because it takes time. To that end, in this presentation, what I'm going to be talking about is a little bit of a different perspective on burnout. As a relationship to context, I'm going to talk a bit about workplace culture and then some ideas and practice. Now, the thing with burnout is you could fill like a week's worth of seminars with this. I'm not going to be able to go into as much depth as would be possible, but I will be sharing some of the resources that we have. So just to make sure we're all on the same page for what we're talking about, because there are some different concepts that are all related to each other, but slightly different. Burnout's the general feelings of energy depletion or emotional exhaustion, the more depersonalization type stuff, the increased mental distance from your work, or the cynical feelings, and then the reduced professional efficacy, like you're not as effective, stuff like that. Burnout has a negative impact on people, and that's very well documented. Pretty much every study that looks at burnout finds muscular skeletal issues, they find psychological issues, mental health issues, and it also has a negative impact on organizations at scale. So the impact are variations of people not being there, either because of absenteeism, attrition, or turnover, which has consequences for, do you have people who have been there long enough to know how to do their jobs well? Lower productivity and lower quality of work, decreased morale, weakened communication and collaboration among staff and teammates, reduced empathy and concern for clients, and reduced commitment to the organization, and just this general sense that the work and the mission that the organization's doing doesn't matter, which is unfortunate because the work we do does matter. My computer is acting a little odd, but we'll just roll with it. I'm going to take a little bit of a different perspective on burnout than some other trainings have done. So I'm borrowing a lot from Christina Malish and Michael Leiter's book, The Burnout Challenge. And Christina Maslach has done a lot of research and publications on burnout. And what they argue is you find burnout when the role and the context are a poor match for the worker themselves. And when I first read that, I was thinking like, oh, so if you're not going to fit at the job, go find a different job. But there are some common traits that workplaces have. So like I have this slide of a canary right here. Canary's living its best life. It's on a branch. It's looking out into the woods. Just that's a happy canary. You probably would not find such a happy canary if you were in a British coal mine prior to December 1986 when the practice was banned, where they were in these little tiny boxes being dragged down into coal mines, where they had a vent that went into the coal mine and then a little like reserve oxygen valve. And the canary was used to detect carbon monoxide. Canary passes out, everyone needs to leave. So, you know, when you're looking at the match between like workplace and worker, it's like, oh, well, we could make this, we could give the canary a gas mask. But that doesn't really change the fact that coal mines are kind of lousy workplaces for most creatures. Like maybe a bat would be happy in a cave. But if we're working on canaries, then you're just going to need a better environment. And it turns out with people generally thrive, research shows over and over again, in particular types of better environments. So we're going to be talking about ways to make that better environment, though it is a relationship, and like all relationships, all parties participating are contributing. I'm not talking as specifically about what individuals can do as well, because in the Erie County Training Collaborative, we have a couple excellent trainings that have already been done that I highly recommend you should go check out. So in April 2021 and May 2021, the late Dr. Kirsten Vincent gave a training about vicarious trauma and resilience. It's really good. Highly recommend you check that out. And then in May 2023, Melinda Du Bois, the executive director of the Mental Health Advocates, gave a training about self-care and the mind-body connection and how those work together. So highly recommend you check those out. And honestly, the entire catalog of the Erie County Training Collaborative is catnip for a curious mind. There's trainings on personality disorders and OPWDD services, and we're doing Alzheimer's next month. So, you know, a little bit of a plug to check it out. I like it a lot. So for this, I'm drawing heavily from 3 resources and a little lighter from other ones. Like I said, The Burnout Challenge is a great book. And the reason I'm drawing from these resources is because I'm not giving this presentation as a perfect practitioner of what I'm going to tell you. I think folks who work with me would find very kind and gracious ways to suggest that the perfect practice really isn't happening here, but you also don't need perfection. My goal here is to give you some ideas that you can take, look into more, and run with, as opposed to lord over you being like, I have a team that has no burnout. How about you? Like, that's not what we're doing here today. This is a hard field. Gallup wrote a book called Culture Shock, and it's actually mostly about employment engagement in the context of increasing remote work. But one of the wild things I noticed is that the predictors of employee engagement and how do you reduce burnout is this Venn diagram that's 2 circles that are very, very closely shaded. If you squint, you might not see 2 circles. So some of the information's coming from there. And if you're in any position of leadership, or you aspire to be, or you happen to have a job and you work with other people, you have coworkers, highly recommend The Speed of Trust by Stephen M. R. Covey. It's a classic. You could probably do, and it sounds he's made a whole career out of this book, a seminar on the concepts that are in there. So any questions so far?
No questions came in yet, Christine. Thanks.
All right, sounds good. All right, so what contributes to burnout? Most of the guides that I've read all zero in on the same sorts of things. Excess workload, feeling a low level of support, lack of sovereignty over the things you're doing, lack of autonomy, lack of influence, not getting a reward or recognition, or just anything that feels like what you're doing is worth your time. values incongruence. And what I mean by that is you may have very strong feelings that something should be done, but the organization that you're working with has different strong feelings about what should be done. And if you may be in a place where that's just not matching. And then interpersonally toxic or unfair work environments. So either people aren't being held accountable the way that they need to, people are not treating each other kindly, just the general vibe of things that contributes to not being able to, or not really looking forward to working with your coworkers. I feel like a lot of people are saying that they can't see the slides. So I'm going to try to unshare and reshare and see if that makes a difference.
Yeah, so they're okay on my end, but maybe try that, Christine.
All right.
Yeah, so some people can, and a couple people cannot.
How's this work? Can you all see them?
So we have a couple people that just chatted in, they're all good.
All right.
And some thumbs up coming
Trying to
in,
be
so.
flexible. All right. We all have efficacy, so some of what I'm going to be sharing is going to be guided a little bit more towards supervisors, and maybe you're not in a supervisory position, but maybe you would be in the future. And also, I really like this idea. It's from the military. You can lead at any rank. Leadership isn't just the formal leadership where I have power and therefore I can tell you to do things, although if you do have power, that can be very effective. But leadership is also modeling the type of world you would like to be in by acting as if it's already there. If you want to be in a kind world, you treat people with kindness. If you want to be in a respectful place, you treat people with respect, stuff like that. I think one of the pernicious ways that people don't do things that could improve it is their expectations are if it's not perfect, then it's not worth doing. And I would argue instead that we're never going to be perfect, but we can be better. So even if something makes something a little bit better, that is worth pursuing as well. And to take more of a strengths-based approach to things that you're trying of, it may not fix all of your problems, but does it make some of them improve? We co-create our environment by how we interact in it. So whether or not I have a friendly workplace culture is going to be based in part by, am I friendly to my coworkers? I have actually seen this like changes in places I've worked. I've had a lot of jobs. Like I've had so many jobs. My resume looks like I'm afraid of starving to death. So I've been in a lot of workplaces and I have seen places change because maybe key people started behaving differently, or, someone who was difficult just decided to pursue more kindness, and it does make a difference. And, it's not just what we're doing, it's how we do it that matters. So we can meet all of our deadlines, but if we're doing it in ways that exhaust everybody, or we're just like hard on everyone around us as we're doing it, that's going to have a different impact if we maintain like the respectful, collaborative environment. Maslow and Leiter argues that to address the burnout, we need to take a different model. So focusing more on the relationship and not just on like, well, this is a Christine problem. She needs to go home and take more baths and do some more meditation and go for some more walks. And like, maybe I do. All of those would make my life more lovely. I'm not disputing that, but it's not, as a supervisor who has jurisdiction pretty much only over what people do while they're here, and as someone in the workplace who's only really influencing the workplace while she is in it, let's look at the relationship of the worker and the situation, and let's look at it in the way that acknowledges that it's both, the both and. Like if I have a lovely marriage, it's probably because both my husband and I are treating each other well. But maybe we also have fortunate circumstances that aren't wearing at us. Maybe if we have enough money to pay for our needs, if we have enough to eat, like, those externalities that can make things more difficult. Same thing with workplaces. And then all the social workers in the room are probably reading that last one being like, yes, focusing on the strengths, that is what we do. Because one thing you can do when you're trying to fix something is you can try to repair what's not right, but another thing you can do is to make sure you're reinforcing what is working well. And sometimes that reinforcing what is working well is maybe a little more accessible than trying to change something. Any questions so far?
No, no questions.
All right. Like I said before, Gallup in particular was doing a study. This came out after the pandemic kind of changed everything we knew. And they were looking for like, what is employee engagement? And the reason that Gallup was really interested in employee engagement is they were trying to help business people make more money, which is what you do when you're a business person. And our goals are a little different, but it's the same protective factors as creating employee engagement. So the need for autonomy and flexibility, whether or not they have trust in leadership, transparency, do people understand why what's happening is going on, and then prioritizing employee well-being. So are the decisions being made with like, is this going to be something our employees can manage? Does it actually help them to redo these schedules or to be home a certain number of days? And actually, if you're curious about like work from home, like this is a pretty good book for that. And like I said, because what Gallup is really trying to do is like help businesses make money, the whole book starts with like, how do you increase your stocks? Well, let's work backwards. How do you increase your earnings? Okay, how do you grow your revenue? And like we have more intangible metrics that we're working on, but employee engagement was the key thing that made a difference in whether or not they were profitable. Matching strengths to the role, so the same sort of idea of that it's the relationship between the worker and the workplace of whether or not this is going to be successful. And in Gallup's case, they found that your direct manager had explained 70% of the variance between whether or not the employees were engaged. What they weren't looking at is the impact of fellow coworkers. They were really just examining like how different pieces of the hierarchical chain impacted a business. So this is like direct manager versus maybe like a further up middle manager or the CEO. But as I was reading it, it kind of struck me that like, well, yeah, duh, whether or not somebody's going to thrive is going to be more based on what's immediately around them than what some faraway policy is if it doesn't have the same tangible impact. So let's talk about the good stuff. We're going to do that focus on the strengths. So an ideal job person match is going to feature these positive circumstances. So a sustainable workload, I know, hear me out, ample choice and control, gratifying recognition and rewards. So that's both the intrinsic and the extrinsic rewards. Intrinsic rewards being like, I'm actually seeing the change in the world I'm trying to make. This makes me feel good. Extrinsic being like the, I have formal recognition. The dollars in my bank account are helping me pay my bills, stuff like that. Supportive work community, norms of fairness, respect and justice, and then the well-aligned values and meaningful work. And really like all of the research comes down to like people want to do a good job. They want to have a good time while they're doing it. They don't want to suffer while they're doing it. And yes, that's my kitten Rex, helping me do work. All right, so we're going to talk about sustainable workload, choice control, and recognition, and then we'll kind of merge those last three together because they're kind of describing the workplace. They're all coming back to the workplace. So what can leaders do for a sustainable workload? If any of you have been holding the magic wand that reduces the incidence of mental illness in the Erie County community, and you've been holding out on us, consider today the day that we start our mutual grudge. But since I actually doubt that any of you have that magic wand, much less have been sitting on it, we're going to be a little limited in the ability for us to reduce the demand for our services. It turns out we're really useful to the community, and what we do is really important and it really matters. So the task at hand is to figure out how to do it without burning out ourselves, our staff, and our coworkers. So tactics that keep coming up is modeling good boundaries with work and rest. I used to have a collaborator that if he was off the clock, it was like he threw his phone into Lake Erie. You would not be able to get a hold of him because wherever he was fully present. And he had extremely good like mental boundaries, and he was very good at wellness stuff. When you're at work, be at work. When you're not, hey, the world's great. If you are a supervisor, you should encourage your staff to take their paid time off because they're going to need rest if they're going to be good at their jobs. And there's an awful lot of life to enjoy, and if you're enjoying life, you're going to be a happier person, and if you're a happier person, then you're going to be a better worker. And also, being a happier person is just a good value in of itself. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in the mental health field. You can do this by taking your own time off. So when I'm off, like I'm off. I use my PTO. I actually recently had an experience where I needed to take a couple of weeks off for like medical reasons, and my staff was fine. I don't even think Erie County noticed that I wasn't here. And I share that because I think sometimes people, especially those in leadership positions, are like afraid to let go of just not being there or letting other people have control over something. And it's okay. Like your team's probably going to be able to go on without you. Your coworkers will be able to pick it up. It's okay to take your time off. It's okay to fill your cup and be out and about and doing other things. I would also argue too, if you're a leader, and again, you lead at any rank, like modeling enjoying life. I noticed this less in the mental health world. I noticed it a little bit more in my previous position in like homeless services, that people identified so much with services that they were providing that it was almost like there was nothing else that they were doing. So if work was going badly, then they were having a hard time. But for the folks in the field who had other things that they were doing, like hobbies or their families, or I don't know, some people in like homeless services have really cool hobbies and art and stuff like that. They lasted longer. So, that's my pitch for taking your time off, leaving work at work. If you're getting the benefit, use the benefit. If you're a supervisor, don't call your staff when they're not on the clock unless there's some absolute super, super, super important to do it, like their paychecks involved or, something like that. Look at the processes. Better yet, talk to your team, your coworkers to look at processes and see if there's anything you can simplify. In the supportive housing world, what I see sometimes are like we do a site visit and we found that there was some sort of process mistake. So another process is created to fix the process mistake. And then it never goes away. And then we do another site visit. And then there's another process mistake. And then there's another piece of paperwork to fill out to fix this. And then that never goes away. And then over time, what we have is, for historic reasons and less so the present ones, this like really high burdensome, like you fill this out, and then you put this in this database, then you do that. Like if you can look at your work and see what types of duplications you can take away, or maybe problems that you are solving that are solved, that can help lighten the load for the other types of work that your team's doing. How do you facilitate a sense of control? I would argue, and what I've seen over and over, is if you can be flexible with something, just be flexible with something. Most of the burnout literature, when they're talking about how you create autonomy, they don't come out and say, don't be a micromanager, but they describe a micromanager and then they say, don't do that. So if you can focus on the results of the work and less on the process that it's being done, and I know for you folks who are working with Medicaid billing, this is kind of like, oh, you actually have to do that. Okay, but what about the other stuff? Can you be flexible about what time people come in and what time people leave when they take lunch? Can you be flexible with like maybe working 4 10s instead of 4 8s, or where do you have that opportunity? Because if people feel like they are guiding their destiny with how they do work, that is going to be a protective factor against burnout. Recognition and rewards, like I told you. So like that day that I was walking through that apartment and was like, these programs work. Great day for intrinsic rewards. We don't get those days every day, so we got to find other ways to reinforce that this is work worthwhile doing. Celebrate the big successes, but also celebrate the incremental progress. Like get in the habit of noticing when something is better than it used to be. So maybe that difficult client who's like emailing you and perseverating on something didn't email you 5 times the way they did the last few weeks. Maybe after, you worked with the intervention, it's only 3 times. That's progress. In homeless services, we're big on harm reduction, and harm reduction is in substance use. It's not like diving straight into an expectation of abstinence from substances. It's kind of like, okay, you're drinking a 12-pack a day. What about a 10-pack? Okay, you're drinking a 10-pack a day. What about 8? And just kind of working towards something that's better and valuing that what's better over, well, you're not perfect, therefore this is not going to work. I think you have to take the opposite of that perspective when we're doing this field, otherwise it will get very difficult very fast. We have chosen a profession where we're exposing ourselves to some very heart-wrenching problems all the time. I like to send thank you notes to folks in the community who did something that was a little above and beyond and helped me out. It's a novelty. People really don't get snail mail. I get a lot of positive feedback from that, and it's like something tangible in your hand. Make sure the people on your team feel seen. So like pay attention to what they're doing. It's like, oh, hey, thank you for printing this out for all of us, or, scheduling this. Dare I say, our administrative assistants sometimes I think feel like they're fading into the background and they're overlooked because people just get so used to seeing it. If you get in the practice of seeing it, that can go a long way. And if you are part of your organization that gets to look at compensation, the fairer it is. This is something that I've learned from doing site visits where different organizations have different pay scales, and the morale at the ones that have higher ones versus the ones that have lower, it's not a linear relationship, but it's a directional one, shall we say. So if you're able to influence that, that can make a pretty big deal. Any questions?
No questions.
All right. So going back to the good stuff. So like I said, we're going to kind of collapse the last 3 into like general workplace vibes. Again, this is just a touch and a taste. It's not really a exhaustive look because that would take a really long time. If you've never read The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, I highly recommend it. I mean, it's not like a super engaging book, but it is a very helpful book. And they go through stories of like what makes teams failures, but to skip to the end, successful teams, Lencioni, I think is how you say his name, I could be wrong, argues that successful teams are built on trust. They manage conflict. They're not afraid of conflict. They're not avoiding conflict. They're not pretending conflict doesn't exist. They are committed to what they are doing. They are embracing accountability. If they like screw up, they own it. They're holding each other to the standards that they set, and they're focusing on results. Were you successful at the end of the day? But that trust, the trust is the really big, important one. And because I can't let a presentation go by without subjecting you all to some sociological information, like when you're talking about culture, you're talking about like the beliefs people hold about reality. So in a workplace, like what do people believe about the workplace? What do they believe about what it is and isn't? The norms that guide behavior. Are we treating each other with more equity, more hierarchy? Are people kind? Are people not kind? The values that orient the moral commitments. So like something about my direct supervisor is I know whatever is best for the client is the thing that he is going to value most. So that helps me understand like what direction the organization is going in. And then the symbols through which these beliefs, norms, and values are communicated, which makes a little bit more sense when we're talking about art and music. I guess if your workplace likes those like motivational posters, that could be an example of it. But in my workplace, for instance, like jokes are often like a symbol of it. I don't have time to go into the most recent one, but you know, the things you look around is like, oh, that's from this norm of like I have cat memes all over my office right now because one of my staff people did that when I came back from medical leave. You know, that's kind of what I'm talking about there. This is going to shock exactly 0 of you, that when Gallup was looking at like, okay, what makes an engaging workplace culture? What makes a place that people are really successful and thriving in? It's friendly, supportive, collaborative, and it has integrity. Peel yourselves off the floor. We clearly all saw that coming. But it's actually like sometimes talking about the things we like intuitively know and talking about them explicitly, like you can look around your workplace and being like, well, are we friendly? Are we supportive of each other? What would it take to change in that direction? And Lynn Anderson and Christine Pearson did an article in like 1999 called Tit for Tat, the Spiraling Effect of Incivility in the Workplace, which is more of a cautionary tale of something you want to avoid. And it's discussed in the Burnout Challenge. But like workplace civility does exist on a continuum. So at the most bare bones, you have like, are you aware of the people around you, who they are, what they're doing, how it contributes to your work? I had a job once where the management took this like really compartmentalized approach to like all the different units at the organization. And if you ask like, oh, what about this? Oh, that's so-and-so's job. And they like wouldn't explain it to you. They wouldn't tell you how it was connected. And what we all ended up doing was like when management wasn't looking, it's like, so what do you do? And like the frontline staff kind of created that awareness because it wasn't being facilitated by the leadership. You can lead from any rank. But that's the most like basic bare bones of like workplace civility, is that enough connectedness that you understand like, how does the senior clerk typist in your organization contribute to the whole? How does the person at the front door, what do they do? Acknowledgement, gestures of recognition that are pertaining to that awareness. Are you, so like you know it, but then you're acknowledging it, you're saying thank you for it. Acceptance, gestures of belonging. So are you including the people who are supposed to be included in on meetings, which if you're in a cutthroat business setting, there's actually like this incentive structure where you wouldn't necessarily do that because you want the credit for the project and you don't want to share it with other people. Are you also including them on lunch when you're going out to lunch? Are you making sure that your coworkers know about stuff? Like, are you, and anything that you're doing that's facilitating belonging? Appreciation, so giving credit for the work that they're doing in a positive way. I have a position in the community where I don't really do anything by myself. Like I'm partially responsible for the HUD grants, but the supervising accountant, thank God for her. I would be completely lost if she wasn't doing her part of it. We facilitate the mental health residential system of care, but there's excellent people working in the community, and thank goodness, because if they, you know, if we're looking good, it's because other people are doing better work. Having that understanding, because in this field in particular, none of us are doing it by ourselves. And then accommodations. Are you willing to inconvenience yourself to help somebody else? So like I have a coworker here who I've had a few stints where there were no assistant housing coordinators because of medical leave or gaps in jobs or what have you. And she stepped in each and every time. And that has been so wonderful for like my sanity. Because if I had to do it completely by myself, I probably would not be here. I would have found another job. But we have a collaborative atmosphere, so you know it will be okay. Burnout Challenge has this very goofy graphic, but I wanted to show you because sometimes the difference between whether or not someone's engaged or burned out isn't just like the number of interactions that are positive, but also like it's the balance. But you'll notice like the difference between disengaged and burned out is there's a lot more negative in it than just like, oh, a little bit of positive. So I share this in the spirit of like, maybe you can do a temperature check of the folks around you if you're noticing that like your staff is struggling with burnout. Like, what are you noticing on the balance of like whether people are treating each other with civility or incivility? What's that look like? And then maybe that gives you a chance to think of like, okay, well, how can I contribute to a change? I am talking more than I thought I would, but let's keep going. Trust, again, Covey's speed of trust, it's great. He argues that trust is the foundation of all relationships, regardless of the type. If you have a workplace where you don't have trust, it's going to be very, very difficult to build the other positive things that you would like to see. Character and competence, so the people themselves, they have integrity, they're intending to do the right thing. And then the competence is like, what happens as a consequence of you being there? Are you actually able to fulfill your intent in what you would like to do? What are the results? Like, if I'm around, what's the consequences of my presence in this situation? Is it positive? Is it negative? Do you rely on me? Am I showing you that I'm reliable? Stuff like that. Again, this isn't really rocket science. Covey argues that there's 13 behaviors of high trust leaders: talking straight, demonstrating respect, creating transparency. Something I like to do in my position is, if I'm making a decision about something, I'm explaining why I'm making the decision that way and like what's informing this direction as opposed to something else. I try to be really predictable so folks feel like, you know, they can disagree, we'll disagree forever, but like there's never been a relationship that didn't have disagreement or conflict, but at least it's understood. If you screw up, try to fix it. Showing loyalty, delivering results, obviously, trying to get better, talking about the elephant in the room, because it's there. It's going to be there. It's going to be there whether you talk about it or not, or if you address it or not, but you'll be seen as more trustworthy if you are willing to address it. Clarifying the expectations, which goes back to creating transparency, accountability, listening before you talking, which is not what I've done through this presentation. I've been doing a lot of talking first. Keeping your commitments, and then of course extending trust, which can feel like a risk, but that is, trust is a type of relationship. So any questions?
No questions.
All right. This book, I would recommend chapter 5. I don't know if I would recommend the rest of the chapters, but personally, if you read the book and you have perspectives on chapters 1 through 4 and 6 through, I think it's 15, let me know. But one of the things I really liked from this book is this discussion about gossip, because I think one of the things that we don't always explicitly know, even if we implicitly know, is the impact that gossip has on organizational culture. So it's both an indicator, but it's a contributor if there is a lack of collective trust. It undermines a sense of belongingness. It can, you know, people get mad, and being mad just consumes a lot of energy. Gossip can contribute to that. And it can also make a workplace where it's harder to discern accurate information, because if you're hearing it from the friend that you trust, you're going to think it's more like, oh, okay, then this must be what's right. But, you know, the game of telephone is notorious for distorting information. I'm already listening to my kids get the facts of family stories wrong. You know, that's just how it works when we're telling each other stories. So minimizing it is very helpful in a workplace. So it's not gossip if you're talking about somebody and the goal is to have like a positive outcome for them, or if you're talking about them in a way that you would be okay with them listening to and your baseline is respect. I'm looking at you direct talkers who are going to say very mean things to people without remorse. That is not what I'm talking about. But if your norm is to talk about people with respect and you're speaking about them, and if they've overheard the conversation, they wouldn't be mad, then that's probably not gossip. Sometimes we need to talk to each other about how to resolve circumstances. So like, I'm thinking of a time I had a struggle with a close collaborator and we were quite mad at each other. So I picked the person that I knew cared about both of us equally. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. And then she's like, oh, maybe you should try this, that, and the other thing. And, you know, they worked. So the intent matters a lot. What you're trying to get out of the conversation is a good indicator of if it's gossip or not. But sometimes, like, if you're kind of going into it because you want to prove that I was the correct person in this argument and I want the validation from you that I was correct, and you know this other person, you're going to take my side, I'm going to build an allegiance, this is probably gossip. If you're trying to indirectly control other people, it's probably gossip. If you're trying to avoid conflict, like I need to resolve something, but instead of talking to you directly, I'm going to go talk to 3 other people who I can influence their opinions about. That's probably gossip. And it's a very human thing to do, but it's also not a very helpful thing to have in a workplace. It's also something you probably can't tell people to not do directly. Is probably behavior that just needs to be modeled, in my personal opinion. Maybe other folks have had different experiences. The book 15 Commitments of Conscious Leaders argue that if you're going to move past gossip, like in an individual moment, one of the things you need to get in the habit of doing is to differentiate a fact from a story. And this can be tricky because people experience their stories as being facts. So what actually happened versus like, what's your interpretation of what happened? And then addressing somebody directly with it. So modeling a norm of direct communication can be very helpful for reducing gossip. If you find yourself needing to reconcile it, they actually argue in that book, it's like, okay, you're going to tell everyone in your organization that we're going to end gossip and this is how we're going to do it. And here's the script. And I'm going to share the script with you because I think it's a good idea, but maybe this is something that you're smarter and can come up with a better idea. If you're approaching someone and you're having a conflict with them, you can affirm the meaningful relationship. So Amy, I am going to talk to you because I admire you very much and I value your relationship. Do you have a time to talk? Not now. Okay, can I come back later? Great. The specific facts are, this is where I try to make up some conflicts. I don't actually have any conflicts with Amy right now, but I left my pen on your desk and then you started writing with it. And I interpreted this as you stealing my pen. I felt really betrayed by that. And my part in this is that I just assumed that you stole my pen instead of asking where you acquired it from and finding out that you just, found a pen on the desk. Like, good day today. What I specifically want is to have my pen back and to resolve the negative feelings that I have thus manufactured between the two of us. And then let's say Amy is hearing this, because let's say the alternative thing was I told everyone in the office that Amy is a pen thief and she's taking my pens. And then we have this like faction of anti-Amy people of, oh gosh, she takes the really fancy ones. You got to put your pens in your pocket. Amy's going to take them. So in that conversation, I would say my part in this was also telling everyone in the office that you stole the pens. And they would say that Amy could respond as, what I'm hearing you say is you think I stole my pen. I stole your pen. Because you found it in my hand and you were looking all over the place for it. Is that accurate? I'm like, yeah, that's accurate. Is there more? No. But is there more? It gives you a chance to elaborate. It's my favorite pen. My husband gave it to me for our anniversary, all right, this is your pen, here's it back, are we clear? And then, whatever the conflict is, it's done. If your team is gossiping, don't participate in it. And facilitate a norm of direct conflict resolution by facilitating your conflicts directly yourself. I went through a similar training at my church, and one of the things they argue is like, oh, you're struggling with so-and-so, I know so-and-so, do you want to go talk to them? Because maybe we can figure this out. And that can also either facilitate end to it and also just kind of stop the conversation right there. So there's a lot of resources about direct communication. I think Radical Candor by Kim Malone Scott is my favorite. Crucial Conversations is pretty good. And if you're a supervisor or you would like to be a supervisor in your future, Everyone Deserves a Great Manager is another good one. I wouldn't recommend that to read that as like a why is your manager not meeting your standards book. That's not the use of the book. But if you are in a supervisory role, I found that to be really helpful when I started supervising people. So long story short is in order to create a supportive workplace culture, explicit expectations about respect, collaboration, and direct communication can be very helpful. I actually do this in training with my own staff, partially because I've hired people who have never really had community-wide leadership positions before. And so it's like, okay, this is how you do it. So just setting that expectation from the go, being okay with conflict and just ensuring it's facilitated in a mutually respectful way. If you have a workplace where everyone's agreeing with each other all the time, maybe they're not, but making it okay to like work through stuff can be very helpful. And then showing your colleagues and your teams that you care about them personally. So like Gallup argues that the 70% of great managers, the thing that sets them aside is they're having one meaningful conversation with their staff per week. They give you all sorts of tips about having meaningful conversations. We're in the mental health field. I don't think we actually needed to go over that stuff, but just making sure you're checking in with people can be very helpful. And if you walk away with nothing else about burnout, is that every single person, worker, supervisor, leader has an impact on whether there's burnout in the workplace. So once again, the good stuff: sustainable workload, ample choice and control, gratifying recognition and rewards, having a supportive work communities, norms of fairness, respect, and justice, and well-aligned values and meaningful work. So I've talked a lot, and that is the format of this training, but it still feels weird. What questions do you all have?
No questions came in, but take a minute here, and if you want to chat in a question, you have a few extra minutes, and Christine can answer those questions. In the meantime, maybe as people are chatting in, Amy posted the link to our evaluation in the chat, so take a few quick minutes to fill that out. The recording and slides of today's presentation will be posted to our webpage in the next few days. Our notices for our future sessions will be emailed out and also posted to our website as well for registration. And just keep in mind, the December training will be December 10th. If you're interested in being a presenter, we are looking for presenters for 2025, so please let Amy know. Or if you have topics you'd like to learn more about, we'd like to know that too. Just looking to see if there's any questions that came in. Denise said I did have a question, unless I don't know if she chatted anything in after that. She said, I really like when you spoke about checking the temperature in the office. Has anyone you know tried that?
Temperature, like metaphorical temperature?
I think that's what it sounds like.
I have seen it work, but I feel like I'd be telling other people's stories, which doesn't feel particularly right. But what I would say is, if you're in a position where you work with a lot of groups, if you see like a leader change and then suddenly the vibe's different, you might want to ask like why that happened. So I had a supervisor once who was just really good at watching how people were doing, as far as like, I guess she was really looking at the match between like the work and what they were actually doing. She was really good at checking in with people. And then she stopped being my supervisor when she took a position of leadership in a different unit. And then when I would be in meetings about that different unit, they wouldn't have the same number of like open job openings that they were always having. So that model does work. I wasn't qualified to actually be in that place, so I can't tell you what the lived experience is, but I do know that I saw a lot less turnover.
One more question, Christine, that came in. This is from Chloe, and she asked, what is the first practical thing you would do to relieve some of your burnout feelings?
I feel like this was a better question for Melinda Du Bois's workshop, but if you're noticing yourself that you're feeling exhausted in the work that you're doing, have a conversation with yourself as to why. Like, why are you feeling this way? Are you feeling like it's not worth it because you're not seeing the impact that it's having? Do you need to kind of adjust what you're doing so you can actually see the successes? Are you feeling overwhelmed by challenges? Is there something in your caseload that's happening? You can talk to your supervisor about it. I personally will, when I leave work, I'm not at work. I'm in my garden, I'm with my kids, I'm bird watching, I'm doing so that's kind of something that I do that helps me. But as far as like the team that I'm part of, what I try to do is make sure I'm, to the best of my ability, my very gracious coworkers will tell you I'm not a perfect practitioner of this, but like try to be respectful. Try to be gracious, try to notice all the stuff my coworkers are doing that's making a difference, because when you train your eye to look for what's going well, you'll actually notice a lot. There's a lot that's not going well either, but you'll see more of the balanced instead of just feeling like you're being crushed. That's my personal experience. Any other questions?
That is all that I see. So again,
Thank you very
Amy
much, everyone.
posted the link to our evaluation in the chat. Thank you, Christine. That was a great presentation.
Kathleen, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
There's
Go
one
ahead.
more from Carolyn.
Oh, I must have missed it. Go ahead.
We try to have the open conversation with people to resolve conflict, but they are not receptive to it. What should one do? Great question.
Yeah, that's a great question. Keep trying. So if you're in a place where, let's say, I mean, I've had jobs where there's most of the people are open to it, that maybe there's just one or two people who are just very closed. Just keep trying, and maybe the model of what there's, when somebody realizes they're being surrounded by folks that are kind of working through their differences, hopefully eventually that will sink in too, and maybe being willing to address conflict, because maybe they're coming from a cultural background where that's very scary and unfamiliar. And that's its own presentation itself. Like there's some cultural backgrounds where, like, if you directly address conflict, then it's kind of considered uncouth. I mean, even parts of the United States are this way, right? If you go down to New York City, we're all like, I say we because my family's from New York City, but you know, yelling at each other directly is kind of an accepted norm of communication. If I go to the American South or the Pacific Northwest, do not do that unless you want to be identified as a New Yorker in about 0.5 seconds flat. You know, it's just not the same thing. So like tact and norms all play into it, but generally affirming that you care about someone and that's why you're trying to resolve it as the first go. Like you're not trying to prove you're right. You're just trying to, you know, work on fixing a valued relationship. That can go a long way. I hope that helps.
Thank you again, Christine, for a wonderful presentation. And thanks to everyone who joined us this month. Thank you for being a part of our collaborative. Have a great day. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving, and we will see you next month.